Hello everybody, my name is Dan. I'm a heroin addict.
Hi, Dan.
On January 1st, I celebrated 5 years sober. December 31st of 2013, I was in Albany County Jail, and had been there for a couple months already. At that point in time, I already knew I was going to prison, but I wasn't sure for how long or when I'd actually be going. I was having trouble sleeping. I was just a huge pity party. Feeling like I got screwed over, whatever, and not really focusing on what got me there. And in return, what I was doing was buying people's medications, drinking jail hooch, using my commissary to pay for dope, coke, weed, not cigarettes, but pretty much anything that came through that could help me kind of get out of this reality that was a 10 by 10 cell, or however fucking small it was. December 31st, we had a corrections officer that was kind of lax. He left the cell doors open. They're supposed to be closed at 10. Everybody locked in, and he left them open past midnight. We'd all drank like a bunch of hooch. I ended up falling asleep in someone else's cell, and the night guy came in and closed them. I woke up that morning, and then got yelled at. Went to my own cell, and I was like hungover, but I wasn't sick really. It was like I was sitting there, and I'm sure it kind of stemmed a little bit from feeling physically sick, but I just remember sitting in there thinking like, I'm doing the exact same thing in this cage that I was doing that got me here. And I was like, this is no good. This is going to do me no good. I knew I was going to prison, and it scared the shit out of me, but I knew that, the only reason I'm going is because I was getting high. I wasn't thinking about things, and I was putting drugs before everything. I really didn't. It wasn't like I just got it right then and there. I white-knuckled it for a long time. I ended up going up to state prison in the beginning of 2014. And then that's the beginning of my sobriety date. I'll kind of rewind a little bit. I grew up in the suburbs of Albany, in Delmar. Older sister, 2 loving parents. And I like to say that my life was unmanageable far before any drugs or alcohol were introduced to my system or my life. I just kind of had this deceptive personality, even when it wasn't malicious or even when it didn't make sense as a little kid, it starts from just dumb little things. My parents, I think from when I was a young age, always wondered what is it that you're lying for? My sister, she did a lot of stuff, but she's never, she was an honest person, and I don't really know, it was just kind of one of those things that always seemed to I felt like I wanted to get out of trouble even if there wasn't any trouble. I was a super hyperactive kid, and I lived in a pretty close-knit neighborhood. I had a lot of really close extended family members. I had a really loving family and a good upbringing. When I was around 9 years old, I was the first time that I was ever I was molested by my best friend's father. He started out with me staying over there, being in the shower, and him accidentally walking in, to progressively more purposeful and obvious things. And that kind of had me revert back to that dishonesty that I was talking about. I didn't want anybody to know. There was no way anyone was going to know. In fact, I didn't really, for a period of time, I was maybe this is me. Maybe this isn't really happening. Because it wasn't as overt as I thought that they teach you in school, So I was thinking maybe I was wrong. Not too long after that, and that kind of went on for a few years. And not too long after that, pretty much right around the same time, two brothers in my neighborhood kind of used me as like their guinea pig. They were like 3 or 4 years older, were going through puberty while I had no idea what anything was. And I really didn't, I didn't get it. You know, I didn't feel like it was wrong. I didn't feel like this was some like aggressive, malicious thing that was being done to me. But I knew that I didn't like it. But I didn't know what they were doing was wrong, right? Like I didn't look at them as like these like perpetrators or whatever, you know. They were like my neighbors, and I thought maybe this is like how it worked. So you know, I was obviously sexualized at a young age, and that facade that I put up of that barrier of not wanting anyone to find out just kind of led to a whole pattern of dishonesty with people, where like I let you see what I wanted you to see. And, you know, it made me a really fucking good liar. And I think 13 was the first time I ever got high. I smoked weed. I didn't really like get it at first. I don't know if I did it right. And so then my friend helped me. I mean, I don't know, like it just didn't work. And yeah, I was one of those kids that like when the bald cop from Delmar came in, the Bethlehem police in like 5th grade with the whole kit that has like the drugs in the glass, and he talks about, well, this one does this and this one does this. And I remember like sitting there being like, that fucking sounds sweet. Like you see things that aren't there, and like you do this and you have like this, that, and the other. And I was hearing that part of it. Like I'm sure he was talking about like homelessness and losing jobs and money. But all I could think about was like fucking rainbows and like you see things and hallucinations. Like that sounds cool. So, you know, like fast forward, like when any drug was introduced to me, like I didn't hesitate. You know, I tried it. And the second time I smoked, I just remember, you know, like it feeling like that was it for me. Like I was able to escape. I was able to like be home and be in an environment, you know, that was like a loving environment, but like I felt like for a long period of time, anytime somebody was looking at me, that like they could possibly know, and this helped me with that. I started drinking not too long after that, same thing. Hallucinogens not long after that, same thing. It was like each drug that I tried was the one for me. I was like, oh yeah, this is the right one. Like this is perfect. And then around 15, 16 years old is when I was introduced to opiates. A good friend of mine, we were all at his house like playing video games. There was like 5 or 6 of us, and this was at the stage of like high school where like, you know, it's everybody wants to like party, but like if nobody's older brother could get beer, we couldn't steal any, like we were just stuck inside. And that's exactly what happened. We were playing Xbox, and I remember my friend Pat saying like, well, my dad has these pills that I heard can like get us high. And so he pulled out this big bottle of hydrocodones. I think they were like the 10s or whatever, but it was a huge bottle. And his dad was this like, he had this like hip surgery, and he was this old Irish alcoholic that like refused to take the pills. He would just drink. So there was like none taken out of the bottle. So we all took a few each, and like that was it. Like that was it. And it's wild to look back on the fact that like there was 6 of us there, or maybe 5 of us, and we all took the same amount of pills. And I was the only one that like stuck with it, you know, like that was it for me. And it took me a long time to kind of like put the pieces together. I was like, well, why me? And then it's like, once you're able to take a step back, it's like, oh, it makes a little bit of sense. But I remember a few weeks later, you know, calling my friend Pat again and being like, hey, does your dad still have those pills? And he was like, yeah, there was 150 in there, man. And I was like, do you think I can get a few? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, all right, what do you want, like 10? And I was like, everybody can just buy the whole bottle? And he was like, I don't even know how much they would cost. And I think we went on like Erowid or whatever to find out how much they might cost. And I paid him like a certain amount, and I had like 100 hydrocodones. They were gone in probably like a week and a half. And I did more research online to figure out that there was other things that were like the same class of drug. And I was like, I've seen that before. And my mom had her wisdom teeth out and she didn't take them. So then I went and took those. And then I, met up with some other kid in high school that told me that heroin is the same thing. And I was like, okay. Cut the shit. But he was very convincing. He said, try it. And so I did. And I sniffed it. And at that point in time in 2004, it was pretty difficult for a couple high schoolers to drive downtown and just find heroin. We actually would drive all the way to Kinderhook a couple times a week to go get it from some kid that he knew out there. And I remember the drive back, stopping at the rest stop on 90 where they have like the I Love New York thing or whatever, and we would whoever wasn't driving would be able to sniff whatever they had, and we made those trips, and I remember my friend telling me he had never shot it, and I said, oh, I'd never do that. And then at one point in time, not too long after that, he was like, yeah, so I actually like tried it and blah blah blah, and he was like, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do it, man. And he was like, all right, he didn't really pressure me, and he did it. We were at my house, my parents were gone, and he shot himself up. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, all right, I'm gonna wait for him to wake up because I'm gonna do that. And I did. Once he kind of got his bearings together as much as you could, he shot me up for the first time, and that was it. Off to the races. That was like 3 months after trying opiates for the first time, and I was shooting heroin. I started missing school here and there. I didn't know anything about withdrawals or anything like that until he told me about it. Fast forward a little bit, I got really high one night and decided it would be a real good idea to wake my mom up at 2 a.m. and tell her that I was using heroin. So I ended up going to Conifer Park after that. I ended up going to rehab. And it's, at that age, like I would be in there and I would hear, older people talking about like, what they thought the reason that they started using or, whatever. And I just remember, knowing full well that like I had some seriously fucked up shit happen to me as a kid. I would say to them like, you guys are just making up excuses. Like, I picked up because I just wanted to get high and it was fun. And I remember my counselor telling me, he was like, I really hope that you figure it out one day. And I was like, man, listen, I just like to get high. Like, it's as simple as that. And I left there. I was back there in, I think, like 4 months. My parents' insurance wouldn't cover the whole thing, so I ended up just going to detox. I got out, and I ended up staying clean from opiates and everything for a while. I went up to Plattsburgh for 1 semester. I came back on winter break and told my parents I am not going back up there. So I transferred to Hudson Valley, lived at home, and things were going pretty well. I graduated with my associates in human services, was not using at the time. And then after that, I transferred to the social welfare program at SUNY Albany and moved into an apartment with 2 friends of mine from high school, which is where I pretty much started drinking again. Everything was cool. It seemed like it was fine. We got to the bar on the weekends. Wasn't drinking during the week. And then I started smoking more. Then I got introduced to Xanax, and I would take it before going out to the bars. I've been banned from, Lark Tavern? Yeah, Lark Tavern. We went out on my birthday, and from what I've been told, I was having a wonderful conversation with the owner about social work, and the next thing I knew, I was screaming at her, which is how it works, Like I know that's how it works because I've seen it with other people, where it's just like everything's fine, then as soon as it hits, it's game over. When I was about 25 years old, I was with a friend of mine that ended up introducing me to crack cocaine, which is really, opiates and heroin have been my longest standing, drug of choice and addiction. But crack cocaine brought me to my knees, and it did it quick, very quick. It brought me to places I never thought that I could be. I did things that I never thought that I would do. And it really just felt like it rewired like my brain, like I would wheel and deal and I would steal and I did some real grimy shit when I was shooting heroin, but like with crack, I didn't care about anyone or anything. My mom would be crying right in front of my face and I would just walk right past her and get my car and go downtown. Like I did not care. And I would just exhaust my resources and just try and do everything I can. I've lost jobs. I ended up getting arrested for like a possession or whatever. Got ACOD'd after finishing Spark outpatient, and then and I got into a relationship with a coworker of mine. We moved in, didn't work out, and after that, I picked up again. I think I had a few months clean at that point in time. And it was like, again, off to the races. I moved back home. My parents kicked me out in about a month, and I was living in the Red Carpet Inn up on Northern Boulevard until I could get into a halfway house, which is where I was first introduced to the 12-step program. I went because I could get out of, it was the only way I could get out of the place was to come to meetings. And I remember the first meeting I went to was in here. And it was a young people's meeting of a different fellowship, and it was this many people all laughing, talking ahead of time, and I just felt like there's no way this is real. Like I knew how I was, and I knew how good I could project happiness, and everything was okay. And I was like, oh, these people are all doing the same thing. This is horseshit. But I still came back. I still came back, and I would start to talk to people and see like, does this really work? I had some trouble with the God stuff, and I remember people being like, it doesn't have to be a religious thing. It's not a religious thing. It's more of a spiritual thing. And I was like, yeah, it's the same thing, man. Like I don't really understand. But I continued coming back, and I started to make relationships with people in sobriety. I had fun sober, which I never thought that I could do, but I still had, reservations. I also got into a relationship very early on in my recovery, which, I kind of was just one of those things where like you're doing well, and then you enter into this relationship, and it's seemingly maybe not a conscious decision, but it's like, well, this person likes me. Like, why do I need to change? Like, I'm where I need to be. I've been accepted. And that's kind of what happened, like I went through the motions, I still came to meetings, I still talked to people, but I wasn't putting forth the effort that so many other people were putting forth, and, I wasn't taking the suggestions. I remember so vividly like how quick it happened, I remember having this conversation with my girlfriend at the time, and I don't remember what it was about, but I remember her just looking at me, and after I finished saying whatever horse shit I was saying, she was like, "What is wrong with you? Are you getting high?" And I blew up on her, and at that time I wasn't. I was damn near close, like I was isolating. I was just not the same person. And I had, she threw a birthday party for me, like, not too long after that. I had picked up, I had a drink, the corner store near me, I had a drink, and then about like a week later, I was doing everything that I had done before. She had thrown a birthday party for me at like some bowling place, and I just remember so badly that I did not want to be there. I wanted to go get high. And so like I think I made up some like argument or like whatever. And at the time, she saw this burn on my thumb and was like, "You're smoking crack." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "You're smoking crack." And I was like, "It's from the toaster oven." And it's like, she fucking knew, man. Like, it was so wild when I look back on it that like people just know, like they know. And like I feel like because of all the years of actually doing it that I can convince people I'm okay. But in these rooms, that was a lot harder to do than it was when I was at home. I left there. and just was wheeling and dealing for weeks, and ended up committing multiple felonies in one night. Getting arrested a couple weeks later, and before I knew it, being sentenced to state prison time. During most of my time in prison, I was in there for 3 years to the day. During most of my time, it was white knuckling. You know, I went to a couple meetings in there. Well, more than a couple, but I went to a few meetings. But you know, meetings in a state correctional facility are not exactly the best place to be vulnerable and honest. In fact, it's probably the worst place. I can only imagine going in there talking about being molested as a kid in front of a bunch of inmates. And like, it was something that like, I just, at that time, I had so much time in a cell and being alone of like thinking about my whole life. It was like, oh, I need to talk about this. And it's like the universe kind of telling me like, now you know, but who are you going to tell it to, right? And you know, I white knuckled it a lot. I ended up getting accepted into this KSAT program, which was a facility that was strictly like based around like, it was a program jail. I finished that, came home on work release, and I went straight to it. As soon as I came home, I got in contact with people that I knew before. They brought me to meetings. I continued going. You know, I knew that the stuff that I did before was not going to work, right? Like the half steps, the looking at the steps and being like, well, I'll do this, and this, but I'm not going to do that one. Or, you know, I'll tell this, and this, but I'm going to hold this secret to myself. And that's, you know, like, I just didn't want to do that. And you guys were here for me, you know, like everybody was here for me. People I knew before and people I didn't. I had this like shadow of this like cloud of just embarrassment and like total uncomfortableness every time I would go to a meeting for months and months and months, because it just felt like everybody knew. And then like finally, I don't know if it was said to me, but I just, at some point in time, it was like, this is like not like, what is self-centered thinking, right? Like everybody that's here for the same thing is thinking about you. Yeah, and it like, in talking to people and going to meetings and taking suggestions and actually doing the work and finding a job, you know, finding a job that I liked, which was really wild for me. You know, it was kind of just like, I was trying to find a job just so I could fucking get out of prison, and ended up finding a job that I've come to love with coworkers that I've loved. You know, I had a period of time where I was going back to jail 2 nights a week, down to Hudson, and in order for me to come home every day, I had to have a certain day off that I had to go to parole, which is not a day that my job like has. It's just not part of like the schedule. So I had never met, I had never like formally met my boss. She had like come in to, I think, introduce herself to our training class. And so I walked into her office one morning at like 7:45, and I was like, so, I'm in prison. I've been there for a few years. I leave work every Wednesday and Thursday and go to the Greyhound bus stop and go down to a correctional facility and then come back here. And I would like to come home 7 days a week. So is there any way that I could just like have some time on Tuesdays? And I just remember her being like, yeah, I'll have to talk to my boss about it. I'll let you know. Because I had Fridays off at the time. And I remember thinking, like, I knew if I had to go to, like, HR, it was going to take fucking forever. And so I just took the chance and went in there. And at the end of that day, she came up to my desk and was like, starting next week, you have Tuesdays off. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I kind of like took that chance and it worked out. You know, that among so many other things after that in you know, my work environment have been hugely helpful. I think a lot of that comfortability and being able to like feel comfortable and talk to people that you work with or work for about just real shit makes a huge difference. I know it's made a huge difference for me, to the point where, I just felt like a lot of the times I would be one person here and another person there, and I'm able to just be myself. So really what it came down to was coming home, coming to meetings, finding a sponsor, doing the steps, finding another sponsor, starting to do the steps again, and really trying to be of service, show up, be available to other people, and just continue to do the work every single day. Like I always hated the one day at a time thing when I was younger, but it really is the truth. So I'll just end that there. Thanks for letting me share, guys.